Right. Hello, everyone. I know no one's watching right now, so I'm going to use this opportunity to kind of get my phone into a better position. Oh, that worked really well, actually. Today I'm going to be reading a little more from my book. I know I was posting on my personal Facebook before. That was kind of a mistake. Should have been using this author page. Those who were a little surprised, maybe if you haven't seen me in person in a long time, if you already know me, used to me having very short hair normally. I had really long hair before. I still have really long hair, just in a ponytail, and my hairline is receding because I'm 31 years old, and it's eventually going to go away. So I'm just going to have long hair while I can, until it goes away for good. In the literary world, yesterday was the 213th birthday of Edgar Allan Poe, one of my favorite writers, and that was something I should have been posting about. Lots of crazy things happening in my life lately, so I haven't really been able to do a lot of posting and keeping up, but my plan is to do a lot more of that now. I have that opportunity again, and I'm going to try to take as much advantage of it as I can. I know this is probably a weird time to be on, and I'm probably not going to have a lot of people viewing or stepping in, but I figured, why not? Here goes. I can even reread this chapter if later on if no one ends up watching. But as I've been trying to push for a while, technically my second fantasy novel, Withered Kingdom, is now available on Amazon as an ebook. Has been for more than a year as an ebook, but now in paperback. I know a lot of people want to buy a paperback versus an ebook. The whole ebook craze from 10, 12 years ago definitely didn't last. That doesn't mean that there aren't ebook readers, but it didn't quite last the way that people expected. They thought physical media was going away. It definitely hasn't. So I'm going to dive right in, I guess. I hope my contacts are going to stay on my eyes correctly so I can read. I have had problems with them drying out when I'm reading under pressure. So before I read the prologue to my book on a different stream that was not on this page, but I'm going to go ahead and read the first part. I have my book designed, instead of into chapters, into scenes and parts. Each scene is divided into parts, and a scene is kind of like a pace of the story. Let me make sure I'm not misremembering here. It's my own book, you'd think I'd know. There are 5 scenes in the book. That doesn't mean there's 5 scenes in terms of places that the characters go, but it's kind of like having acts in a play. The reason I didn't call them acts is because the original idea was to call this book and the second book Act 1 of the whole series, and then I split these two into 2 separate books, and the whole scene and parts division remained a part of the series overall. Having fun talking to myself right now. But I see no point in hesitating. I'm just going to start reading. This is Scene 1, Part 1, titled Arraigned. The king's royal audience room smelled like old cloth to its newest visitor. Unlike most, however, he was not there on political business or to present tribute. He was shackled, and a length of chain ran behind his back down to a set of fetters. Helmeted guards held him in place with clamping hands. The visitor wore little more than dirty, wrinkled beige trousers and leather sandals. His long, straight, blonde hair streaked down around his head like a frozen waterfall, parted just so he could see the room with one eye. His captors lowered him down to kneel at the end of a red runner rug that streamed across the room, and up a short flight of stairs, and ended before the throne. The only source of light was 3 tall windows behind the throne, that reached from floor to ceiling. "What is your name?" a voice came from the silhouetted throne, prompting the visitor to lift his eyes, but not his head. "Speak," a guard nudged the visitor. "You are dismissed. Leave the visitor in place." The man in the throne waved his hand. It was the first glimpse the visitor got that someone was even sitting there. The guards stood up, saluted, and left the audience room with a touch of haste in their steps. "What is your name?" "I don't know." "What do you call yourself?" "I would call myself Gia." "Where are you from?" He struggled for words to answer with. "I don't know." "I am told you were found in the Adwell swamps, but you're not from there, are you?" "No." "You have the features of an Orcanian native. You may obscure yourself with dirt and mud, but I see unsunned skin underneath." "Do you bear the mark in your iris?" The man in the throne paused. "Polaris, check his eyes." From the light of the windows, a figure emerged that sharpened into the shape of a man as it got closer. He wore light armor over a white sashed robe. A line of receding white hair stood out against his black skin. One of his gloved hands lifted the visitor's chin and the other cupped the back of his head, and together they tilted the visitor into the light. The light stung the visitor's eyes. He looked back into Polaris's eyes for a moment, until his own dirty sweat made him blink. He squeezed out 2 tears and tried to keep his eyes open, but his eyelids kept trembling. "His eyes are plain. He is not from the kingdom, your majesty." Polaris let the visitor's head back and turned around. "My kingdom is at war," the king said to the visitor. "You are brought to trial as an invader. Are you a spy for the Orcanian Empire?" "No. I don't even remember anything from more than a week ago." "Do you have an advocate?" The king shuffled on the throne. "I have a friend." Almost as soon as he said this, a man wearing clanking armor entered the audience room. He gave a short salute to the king, then stood beside Gia, but remained silent. "You have made friends with my prodigious General Nova." The king smiled. "General, what do you have to say for yourself?" "I can't say I expected to find you on the side of the accused." "Well, your majesty, I have a passion for justice." Nova slapped a hand onto his chest. "I would never stand against a friend, but I find myself torn between two. I feel motivated to stand down here this time. Gia is a mysterious one, but I think the story of how we came to meet will make all the difference. I have a feast to attend tonight and an army to assemble in the morning, General. As much as I enjoy your stories, I have little time." "Then let me tell you," Gia said. All eyes in the room shifted back to him. "Speak out of turn again, and you'll spend time in the dungeon before my next audience," the king said. "General, do you trust this prisoner enough to let him act as your testimony?" "I do." Nova sidled slightly closer to Gia. "I have already trusted him with my life. Let him explain. You won't be disappointed." Part 2. Testimony. "I was running from what I thought were hunters, hit my head on a branch and fell. I was surrounded by Nova's army, and they tied me up and brought me to their camp." Gia stopped for breath. "That night, Nova and I talked. I told him everything I knew, which wasn't much. We talked about the war, and then he told me I'm an angel. Then he said I had to see you, your majesty." Gia paused as the king's neck tensed to one side. "I don't think I'm an angel, sir, majesty." "General Nova, you believe this man is an angel?" the king asked in a low voice. "With your permission, your majesty, he can demonstrate. It's how I came to know." "I may have trusted you enough to make you a general, Nova, but that's too dangerous." "You can't trust the dark room without—" He paused to pick an extinguished torch from a metal bracket on the wall, having seen it in a little light. Nova opened the fingers of his left hand. In the blink of an eye, the hand glowed red, lit on fire, and started to crackle. He gripped the top of the torch with his left hand, then pulled away. The torch glowed with fire, and Nova's left hand looked as cool as if it had never been on fire. "Guards, if the king approves, release Gia's right hand," Nova said, and held the torch at Gia's right side. The king nodded. The guards unlocked the shackles, but held him nearby. Gia, put out this fire. Magillo, Polaris, and Nova all turned their attention to Gia and watched him swirl his wrist a few times. Gia fixated on the flame of the torch and drew a breath into his flared nostrils and lifted his stomach. Gia held his right arm over his chest, then exhaled sharply as he swung his hand, palm out at the torch. A split second before his hand reached the end of its swing, it glowed light green, and immediately afterward a gust of wind blasted out of Gia's hand and extinguished the torch like a snuffed candle. The stirred air whirled through the whole room before going still again. The guards looked at each other, then clamped Gia's hand behind his back and held him in place. General, you believe that being a windcaster makes him an angel? Magillo asked. No, there's much more to him than that. Nova cracked his neck. We haven't even seen a windcaster in the last 50 years, Polaris said from the side of his mouth. Polaris, what are you implying? Magillo asked. He could be a bastard child of the royal family, a caster that evaded your majesty's royal draft, a clever magician, or an Orcanian, Polaris dismissed. Or an angel, your majesty. I refer to the scripture, the promise of the 4 liberators. My friend here may be one of them. Wouldn't the timing be right? All things considered, Nova waited and then bowed his head. A large lock of semi-curled hair slid out from behind his ear and dangled down. It seemed like the most honest show of humility Gia could imagine. No one spoke for a few moments, and Nova remained still as if praying. Bring the accused to my private dining chamber, the king said. His voice made each of the subjects jump into action. Polaris, come. No more visitors today. The energy of the room changed. One guard stayed with Gia, who looked back to Nova for some guidance. The general stayed slightly bent over. Everyone else speed walked out of the audience room. Pages are stuck. The royal dining room was small, like a stone-walled closet, hardly large enough to fit the warped oak dining table with chairs at either end, and a chair facing backward in the corner. The guards unlocked Gia's shackles and fetters after they brought him inside. By the time Gia took his seat and rubbed his swollen wrists, Polaris was already sitting bolt upright facing the back wall. Gia noticed the king was already seated and stared him down from the opposite side of the wood table. He looked impatient with Gia's inattention. Sorry, Gia looked down at his hands. He had been holding them together until his fingertips went numb. Even when he separated them and set them on the armrest, they felt awkward and prickly. King Magillo looked old beyond his years. His cheekbones made him look like he was staring a few miles out. His skin was pale but bore subtle marks of sun damage, and a few widened pores. Still, the blemishes didn't stop him from looking like royalty. He had long yellow blonde hair tucked back in a braid and trailed far past his shoulders, too far past his shoulders for Gia to know its length. On top of the thick golden scalp rested a crown. It was thin, sparsely encrusted, and stricken with patina. He kept adjusting it, leaving an impression in the smooth stream of gold hair, before it drew down into a braid. His lips drew straight across his face, a fact made more memorable by a slanted wrinkle between his lower lip and chin. The creasing above the nose spoke of some untold burden, nearly buried by time. Still, he looked sharp, alert, and youthful. Gia noticed a broadsword that leaned against the table between them. It was sheathed in a pearled white scabbard and framed by brass curls and spots. Although covered and unhanded, Gia wanted to look away from it. Do you know what this is? The king directed Gia's eyes back to the weapon. It's a sword. Gia wished he could say more about it, just to dodge another question. Do you know whose sword it is? Do you know anything about it? I assume it's yours. It's decorated, but I imagine by some of the marks that it has seen battle. You can't tell me anything else. I can't even tell you my own name. I woke up about a week ago with only a few memories. I knew a growling stomach meant I should eat. I knew an outstretched hand meant friendship. And I know your language, but I don't even know what it's called. or how to speak any other language. Then this means nothing. The king shifted to one armrest, took the sword off the tabletop and leaned it against one of the corners on the right side and left it there. Pommel up. You call yourself Gia. How did that come to be? Nova called me that after he found me. I don't know if it means anything, but it's useful to have a name. It means guide, or fallen, depending on usage. It's old Sienese, very old, and we've only found it used in scriptures that talk about the angel who overthrew the 4 kings of purgatory. He was promised to return one day. I promise you, your majesty, I am in no habit of overthrowing kings. I just want to be left alone. Tell me more about when you met Nova. If you only remember the last few days, tell me everything you can remember. Part 3. The story of Gia, 1 week earlier. Easy, friend. The face of a man with enormous brownish red eyes was partially obscured by a waving hand. I won't hurt you if you won't hurt me. The man set his hand on his own chest. I am Nova, General Commander of the Phyronian Royal Army. Can you tell me your name? I don't know. Gia spoke between panting breaths. You seem to have hit your head. Nova felt around Gia's body, testing joints and checking for Gia's reactions. Sorry for giving you a scare and making you run off like that. You really should watch where you're running. Where am I? The old Adwell swamps. Most of them have dried or turned into mud holes by this time. You picked a good spot to rest, I suppose. Lots of aromatic mushrooms grow around here. Stinks to the heavens further east. What brings an unarmed traveler out here alone? I don't know, Gia thought, and meant it. She had no memory older than a few seconds. I don't think I know anything. Don't worry. Every knocked head eventually straightens out. I hope you come up with a good story that checks out, or I'll have to take you prisoner, General Nova threatened in the kindest way. These are disputed lands, which is sad, really. So many nice mushrooms grow by the crag trees and make the air smell like bergamot musk. Stand up now. Give us no trouble and no harm will come to you. A handful of soldiers surrounded Gia, holding bundles of rope. I need to arrest you, friend. Just hold your arms in front of you. Nova attempted to speak over Gia's protests. The soldiers wound the rope around Gia's wrists, upper body, and ankles. A little bit of slack between the leg loops allowed him to walk, but not run. The guards held him up when he underestimated the slack and tripped himself. Let me go, Gia panted like a dog, squirming in case he could exploit a mistied knot or a loose loop. Nova took hold of Gia by the collar of the clay-stained shirt he wore and looked directly into his eyes from only inches away. Whoa, now, come on. Nova's hold was as firm as boulders, but for a moment he unhanded him. It's just a precaution, I promise. We need to prove you're not an Orncanian scout. A what? Look, if you're a scout, your disguise is more confusing than convincing. You don't see much sun, do you? Untie me! My friend, I'm a general. I obey the king. Orders are to take any potential spies or captured scouts back to the capital for examination. It's nothing personal. Is your king here? If he's not, you could just let me go. I'll leave you alone. And where would you go? Gia thought about it. It's slushy mud and drained swampland for miles in every direction. How did you get here? I don't remember. Ah, Nova said, looked at a fresh spot of upturned dirt several yards behind him and snapped back. Let's get you back to camp. He smiled and took hold of a longer rope that dangled from Gia's arm and pulled him by it like a leash. The meal plan for tonight is mushroom stew. Are you going to kill me? Gia tried not to look anyone in the eye, especially one soldier who walked particularly close and seemed to be admiring him like royalty. Nova slapped a hand on Gia's shoulder and led him out of the upturned dirt. Do you like mushrooms? I love them. Jeff doesn't, though. You know what I had to do to get it put on the menu? Please, just let me go. Gia fixated on getting as much stride as he could out of the bit of rope between his feet. The nearest guard was eyeing Gia close enough he could feel the man's breath. I swear I'm not a spy or anything. I've got it. You can come with me on gathering duty. There aren't too many wild animals out this time of year. Still coming out of their winter sleep and whatnot. Do I have a choice? You look so much like an Orncanian. But you're not. The general didn't seem to have heard him. There's something different about you. There's no silver ring in your iris. You're so mysterious, my friend. You won't leave my sight until we get back to the capital. Nova stepped away and motioned for the guards to escort Gia behind him. Orders? A soldier asked. Yes, get food started straight away. Assign gatherers for wood, water, and meat. I'll handle spices and mushrooms. Nova's voice carried well at broadcast volume. Let's bring our new friend to camp. Camp didn't mean a huddle of tents like Gia imagined. Hundreds of soldiers talked at a dull roar and went about their various tasks, making the area feel busy. Wide canopies covering entire sets of tables stretched in lines through the center of the camp. Smaller tents with simple frames or poles swarmed the clearing, with some others staked out into the tree line. Half a dozen rings of rocks would clearly be used for fires come nightfall. Scores of horses and oxen were tied down in groups on one side of the camp. Here's a lesson I'm glad I learned, Nova whispered at Gia while he looked at the creatures. If you put all of those downwind of the camp, it keeps the smell away. I see. Nova probably didn't hear him answer, as far as Gia could tell. A small uproar from some of the members of the camp cheered and hooted when Nova and his little troop came into view. The general held the rope in his hand, but gave a few one-armed hugs to soldiers that hurried to meet him. I'm taking this one here into questioning, Gia heard Nova tell one of the soldiers. He didn't follow the whole conversation, but understood the soldier's pointing finger and followed as best as he could behind the general to one of the larger framed tents. As Gia passed through the flaps, he felt one soldier adjust the ropes around him so he could sit on a short, overturned barrel. That soldier left, and Nova paced around the tent, taking off and hanging up pieces of armor, talking throughout. I think I'll call you Gia. Okay? Well, you really don't remember anything, do you? Nova's voice changed from a trumpeter's blast to a violin's hum. I'm not much of a reading man myself, but my mother would read me the stories of the 4 angels in the scriptures. The only one with a name was Gia. They called him the Fallen One. Not even that sounds familiar to you? No. I woke up, looked around to try to see where I was, and then ran. Your soldiers and dogs were chasing me, and then I hit the tree branch and fell over. Then I saw pretty much everything. Then I saw pretty much everything. Nova untied a string that held his hair in a bushy tail, making it burst out like a lion's mane. Are you religious? Do you worship anything or pledge to any ruler? Gia shrugged as high as the ropes would let him. Some of the hard strands dug into his shoulders. This is the land of Fyron. Here we serve King Magillo, ruler of the kingdom and protector of the defiant nations. If you keep telling people you don't know who you are, they will assume you're either from the Empire or maybe something else. Neither of these is good. Neither of these is good, friend. On the one hand, you're a spy on a mission for the enemy, or you're going to be under a whole different kind of pressure. Look, General, I don't want to be here. Please just let me go. I won't trouble you again. Then I'll ask again, where will you go? Why does that matter? A man or a woman should always know where they are going. Anywhere but here and somewhere else always end up coming back. You've got me tied up. This is war. I don't have the luxury of trusting a man I just met, unfortunately. The best thing you can do right now is prove yourself. Besides the clothes on your back, trust is literally the only thing you have. That's why I'm taking you with me to gather mushrooms. When can you let me go? The king's court must pass judgment on all suspected conspirators and war criminals. Nova's eyes trailed down to his feet for a moment, then snapped back up. Everyone should do their part. Even with tied hands and legs, you can spot mushrooms with me, Nova said. I can't tell if they're poisonous or not. Then you'll taste them first, and we'll see. Nova slapped Gia on the upper arm and shook his head. Come on, let's go. Let's go down into the gorge here. What do you say? Nova wore a greatsword on his back and tied a leather pouch onto his belt. His hair was tied up in a tail behind his head. They were on their way back out of camp a couple hours later. That's fine. Gia grew concerned when he realized no other soldiers were going to go with him. Nova retied Gia's ankle and wrist bindings so he could keep up. A few yards of rope trailed off Gia's wrists and into Nova's hand. The rope got harder to see as the sun set orange behind the canopy of naked, gnarled boughs. It felt like he was walking through the branches themselves, as their thin shadows raced across his face. "You don't talk much, do you?" Nova trained his eyes on stumps, large rocks, and holes. "What's there to talk about? I'm a prisoner, and I don't even know who I am." "Let's keep talking. Hunting mushrooms gets awfully boring without having someone to bounce ideas around with." "How do I know a good mushroom from a bad one? Just point one out, and I'll let you know," Nova said. "4 eyes are better than 2. Interrupt me if you see one." "I haven't seen any yet. They can be hard to see when you don't know what you're looking for." He stepped sideways like a cat spotting the tail of a mouse and crouched down. He scuttled toward a tree stump, went around its backside, and let out a little yelp as he opened one of the bags he had tied to his belt. It was smaller than a glove and made of itchy-looking burlap. "These ones are so sweet, they're like candy. It's almost a shame to cook them. Changes the flavor so much. If we still had meat in reserve, I would keep these for myself." "You're a commander. Can't you do that anyway?" "General. I'm in general command of the armies as assigned by His Majesty. You have pretty bold opinions about how I run my camp." "I didn't mean anything disrespectful, sir." "Sir? No, friend. Call me Nova. I should probably mention that I'm a half-breed. Half-Vaden. Not that you know what that means." There was a silence, except for the rustling of leaves in the chilling wind, while Nova continued picking mushrooms and dropping them into his bag. "I can tell you've been wondering how I'm so tall. Everyone does." "That's none of my business. The sooner you know, the less there is between us." Nova tied the rope around his wrist, and Crouch walked into another cluster of fungi. "I have no time for prejudice." "Who does?" "You're an angel, aren't you?" "What?" Gia squirmed. "One of the 4. Nova stood back up and cinched his mushroom pouch shut. "The 4 angels promised to protect the king? It's from our scriptures." "How could I be an angel? I don't have wings or anything." "I don't know why you would have wings. I haven't met one with them before." "Even if I was a wingless angel, I'm not holy." "Are you evil?" "No, I'm not evil. But if I got all the best mushrooms and let everyone have the plain ones, I would. I'd eat my fill first and share after. You're the holy one, not me. I couldn't expect goodness from my men if I don't treat them with it." Nova walked over to more fungi, but passed over most of it. "If I woke up lost in the woods, I'd hope someone would come find me. That's why I followed you. It's dangerous and you were alone. Even if you were my enemy, I think the heavens take notice when you help someone and return the favor. It may take some time, but help always comes." "What kind of a general is kind to his enemies?" "Me?" Nova stuck a thumb in his chest. "I've never started a fight with someone who didn't deserve it. I've never killed someone who hadn't done so themselves, or attacked me or my people first. We take prisoners instead of executing Arncanian soldiers whenever we can. I don't let them win, but I know how to fight them when it's necessary." "There's some here." Gia motioned with his hand toward a formation of rocks covered in moss and framed with small, wide-capped fungi. "Excellent eye, Gia." Nova rushed over. "I want to be a good man." He resumed his train of thought. You have a unique opportunity right now. If you truly have forgotten everything, you can choose now to share your mushrooms or keep them for yourself. As an example, of course, you can become either a good person or something else. Every choice you make will change the way you will act in the future. The world could use more good men. Men who would fight for war for the right reasons and know when to stop for better ones. We need men who will share mushrooms. Sorry, I have to change how I'm sitting. Give me a moment. We need men who will share mushrooms. He twirled one of his fingertips and looked up at Gia. Or women, I suppose. I've never stopped one from fighting if she wanted to and was in good condition. Is that why your king made you a general? Your compassion? No. He likes that I can make fire without flint, and can kill almost any man, whether unarmed or armed. Why would you kill an unarmed man? I mean, whether I'm unarmed or not. I have proven myself on the battlefield time and time again, until the sight of blood looks more familiar than water. Half of the time it's been my own blood, but I keep going. Throwing fire from my bare hands may be a unique gift, but I think secretly the king really gave me my position because I kept going when others stop or turn back. Speaking of turning back, that's our direction now as a camp. We just finished a border patrol march and need to report to the capital. It will take a full week at least to get back, so gathering trips like this will be a regular thing. Get used to looking for food. There are lots of things a person may think they need, but food is possibly the most important. I'll keep looking. Gia walked off downhill deeper into the gorge. He felt the slippery dead grass caked onto the stiff mud and hoped he wouldn't fall over and keep sliding. He wondered why Nova wasn't more concerned about keeping track of where he was. If he made a run for it while Nova was crouched, he could drag him along and find a rock to break the rope with or something. Just a matter of timing. He looked for the general, but Nova wasn't where he thought the general had stopped last. Perhaps Nova headed toward the gorge in the first place, so there was only one way for Gia to go, forward. Just a few steps further, and they were in the gorge. He was convinced the rotting roots and red clay walls around him wouldn't support even the most earnest attempts to climb out. That and the sun was gone now. It got dark quickly, but Gia could still see most of the ground and nearby trees. "Nova?" he asked out into the damp air, hoping for some kind of response, without having to say anything again. He suddenly felt like something was watching him, or at the very least seeing him from some far-off place, the way a fly sees a room all at once, but watches nothing. He stood as still as he could, hoping to pick up the sound of fingers flicking through dirt and fungus, but it was quiet. The soft, thick clay and dirt all around him soaked up even the sound of his foot sliding slightly as he tried to stay in place. He figured his voice hadn't made it out of the gorge, and so called again louder. Still there was nothing. He called louder, but there was no answer. Gia recalled what Nova said about the animals in the forest, and started imagining things that made him curl down into a crouched position. Something moved behind Gia, and he didn't move his head as he heard Something moved behind Gia. He didn't move his head as he heard the dead grass breaking up, and what sounded like a log sliding down the gorge floor toward him. It stopped inches away from his left ankle. He turned his eyes to see a dimly lit limb that didn't belong to him next to his shoe. It was a leg, and it was joined by a matching clenched leg. Then Nova's torso and the front of his hair came into view. "I heard an oog," Nova whispered. "You may want to get down on the ground with me." Then Nova went as quiet as if he had been a log after all. Gia bent his knees more and felt his downhill foot give up friction, and he went to the ground, sinking into the damp dirt and kicking a bit of it forward from the bottoms of his feet. Then he could hear them, a few padded footfalls, mingled with claws scratching on wood and stone. They pranced closer from a few locations. Gia couldn't tell exactly how many there were, but it was the next sound he heard that made him fear the unknown in the dark. That's not growling. Oogs have no vocal cords. What is it, then? Their stomachs. They're hungry. Oogs have 4, and keep one empty all the time. They can sound like they're growling. Great. We're going to get eaten by a bunch of beasts, and we won't even get to say that we filled them up. Can we fight them off? Talk to me. I don't want to die here. I could fight one off. They're like wolves and bears at the same time. That doesn't help. Really? Nova gave a sort of laugh, genuine despite the situation. Wolves are great. Right, information. Oogs can't see, and they don't fear fire, much to my dismay. They work mostly on smell and have poor hearing. Your little dive into the grass might make you more invisible than I. They have 4 main claws on each front paw, and I'd say there's about 3-4 oogs out there. And do you think you can take one on? It's not the claws, it's the teeth that make me wonder. He paused after hearing something else. Oh, wait. No, there's at least 6. That's almost a full pack. Hey, if we get out of this, there's plenty of meat for the mushroom stew. Are you serious? You're thinking about food? Yes. Weak points? Strategies? How will we get out of this? I say go for the throat. If they can't breathe, they can't bite as hard. 7 now. That's almost a full pack. What's a full pack? 15, but probably not in these parts. How many do you expect, Nova? Well, Nova must have been tilting his head side to side by the way he spoke. I would guess 20. They need more in packs in this area if they want to survive a swamp crawler attack. Never mind. I don't want to know. Gia took a deep breath. What's the plan? Attack now, or wait for them to sneak up? If we attack now, we might make it out of this tight space. We're boxed in down here. What do you want to do? You're the general. Shouldn't you have a plan? Wait, the mushrooms. They're probably following the smell. Let's throw them down into the gorge and make a run for it. Straight back to camp. We'll alert the night guard that we should be in good shape. Minimal casualties. We can outrun them? Not without a head start. You'd better expand your aura's light if you want to be able to see the trees as you run. My what? It's a new moon tonight, and there's clouds over the stars. How do you think you can see right now? You have a bright aura, but if you don't know how to use it, then I'd better throw those mushrooms as far as an arm can if either of us are to get out alive. It usually takes months to awaken a caster. So here's a crash course. Nova got up to his knees and turned his face uphill. Gia followed suit and could now see the dim light hovering around his arms. Nova detached the mushroom bag from his belt. Feel the power that moves around you. The wisps of your spirit are like fringes of a blanket. You can harness them. Change it with your mind into whatever form it will take. You can't force it, but you can control it like another arm or leg. It's part of you. Don't expend it all or you'll be all gone, snuffed like a candle. Give me one moment. Could you at least cut my ropes? The rising panic tightened Gia's throat. Sure. Nova pulled a knife from the sheath on his ankle and slit the ropes. Gia rested his hands in front of him to pull himself more fully on the ground. Then saw the knife held in front of him. You'll need something if they get a bit too friendly. Gia took the knife and cut his hands free. He listened to Nova count the seconds before he threw the bag. At the last second, Nova swung his body around and flung the bag like it was covered in acid. Unfortunately, he let go late, and it smacked directly into the gorge wall, causing it to burst open. Everything inside poured out onto the clay hardly 5 feet from where they were. Still, Gia ran. He slipped a few times and heard the growling intensify, and scrambled like a lizard falling into a hot metal pan. An array of shining teeth approached Gia's vision as he reached the end of the gorge. The jaws slammed shut, almost floating there for a second, reflecting Gia's aura before he ran into the row of sharp fangs. It felt like running into a tree, but Gia sprang back up and slid between the side of the oog's jaws and the clay ledge. As he squeezed further, the clay wall narrowed and became more of a stumbling block. Gia fell backward onto uneven ground and heard another oog behind him leap off the ground. He reached out to brace for a body slam, but felt its arms wrap around his, and its claws swiped around inches from his face. He had stopped one, but it was heavy, the kind of heavy he could only hold for a second, and have to drop or shove away. He shoved the arms to either side of him and kicked, expecting the first oog to have turned by now and taken snaps at his legs. Gia punched upward into the air with both fists, hoping he would connect with the creature's throat. His knuckles hit deep into the sides of the creature's neck. Not as solid a hit as he hoped, but he succeeded in making it pause long enough for him to get his legs under him. He thought about his aura just as Nova had said, and flung his arms out toward the two oogs he knew were near him. For a moment his aura flared like a green fire, but he couldn't keep it going. Maintaining the light felt like trying to hold fine sand in his bare hands. Still he got a glimpse of 4 oogs, including the ones he knew about. They closed in like a pack of wolves. With a scream, Gia ran between the 2 smallest oogs and kept going at full speed. The oogs must have collided while giving chase, Gia thought, by the sound of their bodies thudding together. He ran so fast he could hear the wind howling as the night air whipped around his ears. Just as he felt he could ramp up his speed, his right foot jerked back, snagging on a root. He tasted dead grass and damp dirt almost as quickly as he knew he was going down. He rolled over, curled up, and sawed his foot free with the knife. The oog ran all around him and split off into different paths. As he spat grass from his mouth, he tried to make another flash of light with his aura. He got a pulse of emerald green and saw a few oogs out in every direction. Their wet noses pulsed with breath, trying to find prey. He knew what was happening then, and rolled back over. He thought it was stupid, but he was willing to do anything to not smell oog breath or see their teeth. Gia wiggled into the dirt to cover his scent. Nova was nowhere to be found, until Gia noticed a few oog were searching, and looked over just in time to see a flash of red and orange light. Nova did say he could control fire, but something was wrong. The general said that his fire was practically useless against the eyeless beasts. They must have surrounded him. Gia filled a hand with dirt and took off in the direction of a spot of fire lingering on a tree. Gia didn't think about the consequences of what he felt next. He ran, ignoring the pain in his right foot and knee, but knew he was bleeding somewhere. He yelled for Nova, but heard nothing. A few seconds later, he could see a bright blaze dance between the trees. As Gia caught up, he saw that the light was Nova, holding one flaming arm aloft, jogging backward, and swinging his sword in front of him. "You sure are hungry, friend, but I can't let you eat me," Gia heard Nova say before he got within striking range of an oog. Gia jumped and sank the knife into the back of an oog's neck and fell down upon it with all of his weight. "No!" Nova shouted and held his flaming hand out like a parent toward a child in danger. Gia yanked the knife free and was about to pick another target until the oogs that surrounded Nova all turned to face Gia. Like flies to manure, the oogs charged all at once. "It's the blood! They smell it on you!" Nova's voice carried over the tide of bristling hide. "They smell it!" Gia dropped the knife and backed into a tree. The nearest oog jumped up, aiming for his bloodied hand, and opened its jaws. Gia turned the same fist downward and swung underneath the oog. The result was an uppercut that bent Gia's wrists, but still forced the beast backward onto a few of the others. Before he could wind up, another oog latched onto his forearm from the side and tore into Gia's flesh. With strength he didn't know he could summon, Gia swung his arm like a sword, loosening the grip of the creature from his arm. He switched his stance to guard the blood streaming out of his arm. It felt foolish, but he thought that holding his arm would somehow cover the smell. Claws and teeth came at him like an ocean wave, uniform and massive. They seized, snapped, and slashed, opening a number of new wounds. Through the bodies, a flaming sword sunk down into the spine of the largest oog, striking it dead on the spot. The blood boiled off it in seconds after it came up to move to the next victim. The oogs dropped off Gia and circled up around him from behind, as though they were hiding from the flaming sword. Gia smelled the sharp tinge of hot metal and ran to get behind Nova. A few oogs followed, and the first took Nova's sword through the back of its neck. Nova kicked this one off, and the others backed away. Nova turned his cheek to Gia, but just one moment, but it was too late. One oog shot like an arrow for Nova's left leg. It clamped its teeth deep into the flesh around his knee and whipped around, twisting Nova's leg and dropping him to the ground. The second the sword left Nova's grip, the flames vanished from the steel, but stayed on his hands. Gia stood frozen for a second, unsure what to do next. The oogs converged on Nova. This time he had to save the general. Gia took a deep breath and mentally clawed through his mind, looking for the will to believe he could create a burst of fire like Nova, or better yet, a big gust of wind. If nothing else, that would distract the oogs. He shut his eyes, grit his teeth, and swung his arms, trying to harness the power to sweep all of the oogs away from Nova and himself. His aura flashed green again, and the wind whipped up to a sudden gust as he completed the swing of his arms. The wind was strong enough to nearly blow him and even took a few of the oog over. The oogs all stood on their hind legs like bears and turned in the direction of the wind. Gia pulled at his spirit's power once again and created another blast of wind. The noses of the oog bounced like fish breaching a river. Then they ran toward the wind. General Nova, Gia panted, feeling as weak and sore as if he had fought off all the oog with his bare hands. He teetered over the general, who held a finger over his lips. "You're alive!" The general shushed him and stayed on the ground. Gia let himself down by leaning on a nearby tree. "You can control the wind, friend? That's a rare gift. An ancient one," Nova whispered at first, then spoke low and relaxed. He was covered in lots of small scratches and sweat-wet dirt, but not a single burn. "I didn't think anyone has cast the wind in over 100 years, except the old king. Gia? Gia?" Gia stared wide-eyed into the canopy overhead. His back arched like the muscles in it would turn to stone. Nova set a hand on his chest and tried to snap him out of it. "Come back to me, Gia." Nova shook him with their noses nearly touching. "You use too much of your aura at once. Feel for the place the aura comes from, deep inside you, your chest and gut. Can you feel it?" Gia managed a nod. "Focus on it. Let that light refill you from the inside out." Nova backed up and tilted Gia's head back to keep his airway clear. "Don't fight it. It will warm you back up. You just have to let it. Breathe, Gia. You have to breathe." A second or two later, Gia shivered. His back muscles loosened and he laid flat on the ground. He breathed deliberately and relaxed until he looked like he might just fall asleep. "That was some impressive aura power, Gia," Nova said, keeping an eye on the part of the trees where the oog ran. "I think they're headed for the camp. The smell of smoke carries far on the wind." He reached down for Gia's arm, helped him up, and jogged towards camp. Well, that's a lot more than I thought I would end up reading, but that's the first three parts of Scene 1 of Withered Kingdom. For sale now on Amazon, $12 as paperback, $3.99 as an ebook. I don't know what else to say now. My mouth is really dry from all that reading. And I think I have more success streaming directly on my own personal profile than here on the author page. I'll probably end up sharing this video to my personal profile later on and hopefully build up some more viewers there. To anyone who ends up seeing this, please reach out to everyone you know. Anyone that reads books, especially fantasy and science fiction. I'm trying to gain as much of a following as I can. The book is again called Withered Kingdom, written by me, Nathan Thomas Orgel. It's available on Kindle only right now, or Amazon only, I should say. You can get it on the Kindle app or on a Kindle device for $3.99 as an ebook, and then $12 flat and even, basically, before taxes. And I believe if you have Amazon Prime, the shipping would be free for the paperback book. So $12 for paperback, $3.99 for the ebook. I'm toying around with the idea of making a hardcover as well, because just after I produced the paperbacks here, Amazon gave me a notification like, "Hey, we do hardcovers now too for Kindle Direct Publishing." And I thought, wow, if only you'd told me that a little sooner, I might have had both of them come out. But for anyone who sees this, please comment under this video if you'd be interested in getting a hardcover version of Withered Kingdom, if that might be more interesting for you. I think it's a better think it's a better margin of profit as well for writers to have hardcover books, just because they tend to cost more. They don't tend to cost significantly more to produce, but people are typically willing to spend almost twice on, twice the regular price of a paperback on a hardcover. So for anyone who ends up seeing this, please leave a comment, a reaction, share this video, whatever you can do. I'm hoping to stream more frequently, once or twice per week at least, and work on word of mouth. I've heard it said time and time again that the best way to sell a book is by word of mouth. I need to find some champions of my book to help spread the word and help get people aware of this book. Hopefully it'll be available at the Oshkosh Public Library very soon, here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I don't know if it is. I dropped off the books and they said that whoever reviews them still has to do that. I should check back. If they give me back my books, I have more that I can sell personally. If they don't, that's even better, because I would rather people have the opportunity to check them out at the library. But for now, I'm going to move on to some other projects for my day. Thanks for watching, everyone who has. I'll see you next time.